On a bright, sunny day, a sleek private jet stood proudly on the runway, its polished exterior gleaming under the midday sun. Inside the cockpit, a confident young pilot named Guy adjusted his controls, his focused demeanor hiding a quiet excitement for yet another routine flight. Meanwhile, Marissa, a sharp and determined CEO, stepped onto the plane with her usual air of authority, already muttering about how this trip was wasting her precious time. She barely glanced at the luxurious cabin as she sank into a seat, her tablet in hand and her fingers flying across the screen, replying to emails like her life depended on it. But little did they know, their lives were about to collide in ways they could never have imagined. A looming storm and a twist of fate would strand these two polar opposites on a deserted island, forcing them to face their differences, their vulnerabilities, and ultimately, something far deeper than survival. The jet's takeoff was smooth, with Guy expertly navigating the controls, his co-pilot assisting as they ascended into clear skies. Marissa, buried in her work, barely noticed the serene view outside the window. But the peace was short-lived. Guy's sharp eyes caught a blinking light on the instrument panel. A storm system was forming ahead, faster and more dangerous than expected. Brace for impact, his calm voice crackled over the intercom, snapping Marissa out of her focused haze. Turbulence rocked the plane as Guy battled the controls, every muscle in his body tense as he fought to keep them steady. Then it happened, an engine failure. The plane began to plummet, alarms blaring as the storm roared outside. With unparalleled skill, Guy managed to guide the aircraft toward a small clearing on an uncharted island. The landing was rough, the impact violent, and when the plane finally skidded to a halt, smoke rose from the wreckage. Marissa sat frozen, her hands trembling as reality set in. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt, her sharp demeanor replaced by visible fear. As they surveyed the aftermath, the gravity of their situation sank in. The co-pilot and Marissa's assistant didn't survive, leaving the two of them to bury their companions with heavy hearts. Guy stood somberly by the makeshift graves, the weight of leadership evident on his face. Turning to Marissa, he said in a steady voice, "It's just us now. We have to survive." But his words didn't sit well with her. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her disbelief bordering on panic. "We'll be rescued, right?" Guy's calm resolve clashed with her rising despair. "We're stuck," he said grimly, gesturing to the wreckage and dense jungle around them. "For now, it's survival. And that starts here." The sun blazed overhead as Guy wasted no time putting his survival skills to use. He scouted the area, locating a small stream of fresh water and gathering fallen branches to build a shelter. Marissa, meanwhile, stood awkwardly on the beach, the reality of their predicament weighing heavily on her. She was used to controlling boardrooms, not cracking coconuts or weaving palm fronds. When Guy returned, arms full of supplies, he found Marissa pacing, her disbelief still apparent. "I can't believe this. I'm not built for this," she muttered, gesturing at the jungle and wreckage. Guy set the supplies down and looked at her firmly. "You might not think you are, but out here we don't have a choice. We adapt or we don't make it." Marissa begrudgingly followed his instructions as they began assembling a crude shelter. Her frustration grew with each failed attempt to weave the palm fronds together. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, tossing the leaves aside. Later, when she tried to spark a fire and failed repeatedly, her temper boiled over. "Why do I even need to learn this? Isn't this your job?" Guy's patience finally wavered. He stood, his tone firm but calm. "Out here, we're equals, Marissa. If we're going to survive, we both need to pitch in. This isn't about who you are out there. It's about what you can do here." His words stung, but deep down, Marissa knew he was right. With a resigned sigh, she picked up the sticks again, this time following Guy's guidance more closely. Together, they managed to light a fire as the sun began to set. The flickering flames cast shadows on the beach, and for the first time, Marissa allowed herself a small moment of gratitude. "I guess I should thank you," she said grudgingly, glancing at Guy. He smirked, the tension between them easing slightly. "Don't strain yourself," he teased. Despite herself, Marissa smiled faintly. Though their differences were stark, She realized she had no choice but to trust him. As the fire crackled, their partnership took its first tentative step forward. The days passed as Guy and Marissa found a rhythm in their survival efforts. Together, they improved their shelter, crafted from sturdy branches and palm fronds, and even managed to create a makeshift rainwater collection system. Each small victory, whether successfully fishing with improvised spears or cracking coconuts open without spilling, brought a flicker of hope. Marissa found herself laughing at Guy's playful quips, a reminder that even in dire circumstances, humor could lighten the load. But nature had other plans. One evening, dark clouds rolled in, and the air turned electric with the promise of a storm. The winds howled, and rain pounded their fragile shelter, reducing their hard work to rubble in minutes. "We have to move," Guy shouted over the deafening roar, grabbing Marissa's arm and guiding her toward higher ground. Drenched and shivering, they huddled together under a hastily constructed lean-to, their bodies pressed close for warmth. The storm raged on, the thunder a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Marissa's facade cracked as she whispered, "I'm not built for this, Guy. I don't know how to do this." Guy turned to her, his eyes steady despite the chaos around them. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Every time you get back up, every time you keep going, that's strength. You don't have to be perfect, Marissa. You just have to try." Her chest tightened at his words, a mix of gratitude and disbelief washing over her. She had spent her life proving herself in boardrooms and contracts, but here, stripped of all pretense, she saw that survival was about more than just control. It was about resilience. When the storm finally subsided, the two emerged to assess the damage. Their makeshift home was gone, and the beach was littered with debris. But something had shifted. Marissa watched as Guy began rebuilding, his determination unwavering. For the first time, she saw him not just as the pilot who had crash-landed them here, but as someone deeply selfless, capable, and dependable. Her guarded walls began to falter, replaced by a growing trust in the man who had become her lifeline. Amid the remnants of the crash, Guy stumbled upon a damaged transmitter buried in the sand, its casing bent but its inner components mostly intact. His heart quickened as he held it up. "This might be our ticket out of here," he told Marissa, who had been sifting through debris nearby. For the first time since the crash, a glimmer of hope sparked in her eyes. They worked side by side under the blazing sun, sweat dripping as Guy meticulously soldered wires and Marissa held components steady. Her manicured nails, now chipped and dirty, trembled as she passed him tools from the survival kit. "Do you think it'll actually work?" she asked, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. Guy's jaw tightened as he focused on the intricate connections. "It has to," he muttered. As the transmitter crackled to life, they cheered, momentarily forgetting the weight of their situation. Guy grabbed the attached microphone and spoke steadily into it. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 319. Requesting emergency assistance. Coordinates unknown." They waited, breathless, as static filled the air. Then, a faint voice responded. "Flight 319, this is Coast Guard Command. Please hold your position. Assistance is en route." But their joy was short-lived. Minutes later, a distant hum of an aircraft broke through the sky. They sprinted to the beach, waving frantically and lighting a fire to create thick plumes of smoke. "Over here!" Marissa screamed, her voice hoarse. The plane approached, its shadow passing over them, but it didn't veer or circle back. Instead, it disappeared into the horizon, leaving them behind. Marissa sank to her knees, her tears mixing with the sand. "That was our chance, Guy," she choked out. "They didn't see us. We're never getting off this island." Her despair was palpable, her shoulders heaving with each sob. Guy knelt beside her, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Hey, don't do this. Don't give up now. We've come too far to stop fighting." He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his eyes locked onto hers. "We've survived this long because we didn't give up. And we're not giving up now." Marissa looked at him, her tears slowly subsiding. His unwavering determination was infectious, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. She nodded, her breath steadying. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll keep trying." The failure of the rescue attempt left them shaken but resolute. Together, they vowed to rebuild, to refine their efforts, and to stay strong, for each other and for the chance of a new tomorrow. The sun blazed down as Marissa and Guy added the final branches to their makeshift signal fire. The smell of burning wood filled the air, thick smoke curling toward the sky. Then it came, a distant drone that grew louder, steadier, and unmistakable. Guy froze, shading his eyes as he pointed toward the horizon. "That's a chopper," he said, his voice filled with restrained hope. Marissa's heart raced as the helicopter came into view, its searchlight sweeping across the beach. "They see us," she shouted, her voice cracking with relief. The chopper hovered low, and a rescue team descended, guiding them aboard. As they strapped into the helicopter, Marissa looked out the window at the island that had been both their prison and their proving ground. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but Guy's quiet voice cut through it. "Marissa," he began, his eyes locked on hers. She turned, her expression soft, waiting for him to speak. "Being with you on that island, it changed me," he admitted, his voice steady but raw. "I've never felt like this about anyone before." Marissa's breath caught. For a moment, she was overwhelmed, her mind racing with memories of their time together. The quiet nights by the fire, the shared struggles, and the bond they had forged. She couldn't find the words, but her eyes glistened with emotion as she reached out and gently squeezed his hand. It was a silent acknowledgement of the connection they had built, something words couldn't fully capture. As the helicopter soared toward civilization, the weight of reality began to settle in. They were returning to their separate lives, to the worlds they had left behind. Marissa leaned back in her seat, her gaze drifting to the horizon. The thought of being apart from Guy felt heavier than she'd anticipated, and she wondered how she would navigate the emptiness that threatened to follow. Guy, too, sat in silence, his mind grappling with the inevitability of distance. For all they had endured together, the question now loomed. Could their bond survive the return to their old lives? The answer hung in the air, unspoken but ever-present, as the chopper carried them away from the island and toward an uncertain future. The grand ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, the hum of polished conversation filling the air. Guy, in a borrowed suit, felt slightly out of place amidst the corporate elites, but his focus was locked on one person. There she was, Marissa Blake, radiant in a midnight blue gown, commanding the stage as she addressed the crowd. "I owe my life to someone extraordinary," Marissa said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. The room hushed as she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Guy. "When I was at my lowest, stranded and hopeless, he not only saved me but taught me what it means to truly trust and rely on someone else. Tonight, I want to honor the man who reminded me of my own strength and resilience." Applause filled the room as Marissa stepped down from the stage, making her way through the crowd. When she reached Guy, she paused, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice just for him. "You didn't leave me much choice," Guy replied with a chuckle, holding up the handwritten invitation. "But I'm glad I'm here." Later, on the balcony, the city lights stretched out before them. The bustling noise of the gala faded as they stood side by side. Marissa's voice broke the silence. "You've changed my life, Guy. Not just on that island, but now. Seeing what's really important." Guy turned to her, his eyes steady. "You've changed mine too, Marissa. More than I ever thought possible." She hesitated for a moment before reaching for his hand. "So, what happens now?" He intertwined his fingers with hers, a quiet confidence in his smile. "Now, we figure it out together." As they walked back into the gala hand in hand, their connection was undeniable, their bond unshakable. The future ahead wasn't certain, but for the first time, they both felt ready to face it together. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales. Your support keeps us going.